Some of the early reaction to the book has been interesting because I sort of arrive at this idea that we shouldn't try to talk the oil and gas industry into being good actors here. Like, they have a role here, which is to extract oil and gas from the earth and sell it and make money. That's what they do. Don't look to them to do other things. Like, don't look to them to, like, develop great solar technology. They're not going to do that. They're lions. They're going to eat gazelles. But
they're going to, like, eat all the gazelles.
Yes.
And then they're going to start to eat the baby lions.
Yeah, that's actually well put.
Thanks, Rachel.
Sure. I mean it when I say nothing against people who work in the industry. I mean, it's lots and lots and lots of Americans work in the industry. I don't think they're bad people for doing so. I use oil and gas in my life. Like, this is the way that our lifestyles and our economy are based. But there has to be an interruption of that because of the climate crisis. And there ought to be another imperative for us doing that beyond the climate crisis, which is that they're screwing up democracy at a time when democracy is under all sorts of domestic and international pressure. We need democracy, and we need heroes for democracy, and we need strong examples of democratic governance that works everywhere right now.
Where do we get the political will to make that happen? I feel like it has to come from the bottom, right? It has to...
Well, part of it is just knowing what's going on, to recognize not only the long-term idealistic view that you might have of what could happen if we were a greener world, but what we need to happen now urgently at a time when we really need democracy. Putin had to keep at bay was the prospect of strong, rich, stable, Western-oriented democracies in Russia's near abroad. The solution was simple. Use Russian natural gas and oil, not only to make money for the Russian state, but also to keep neighboring countries corrupt and dependent. Putin's team in the Kremlin was delighted to utilize a man with Dmitry Firtash's special skills and talents to shape Ukraine to its liking. I swear to God, I did not know when I wrote this that the president was going to be impeached because of a scheme cooked up by Paul Manafort and Dmitry Firtash. This is like all on one page. We can talk a little bit about how the oil and gas industry and its influence, I think, do link to this impeachment crisis. But I also want to say that I didn't set out to write a book about oil and gas, and I am not an expert. I was looking for the sort of motive force for what Russia did to us in 2016. What I ended up at was a book about the oil and gas industry, not by choice. That is where the facts led me. Because the oil and gas industry is propping up a whole bunch of governments and a whole bunch of even systems of government all around the world. And if the oil and gas industry loses its market share and loses its sway and loses its wealth, borders of countries are going to change. Whole countries are going to change their systems of government. Dictatorships will collapse, new opportunities will arise, but it will be change. I think it's also important to realize that this industry, as hugely rich and influential as it is, it's important to think about it in environmental terms, but it's also important to think about it in terms of politics, because this is an industry that makes its own political weather. Setting aside whatever else might be bad for your country in terms of producing oil and gas there, we see over and over again that where oil revenues flow, government and governance tends to suffer, even when we're talking about a whole lot of oil revenue. The founding energy minister of Saudi Arabia says, all in all, I wish we had discovered water. The founder of OPEC says, as far as he can tell, oil is, and I quote, the excrement of the devil. When the founder of OPEC tells you that oil is not just poop, but devil poop, right? That's like there's got to be a book in there somewhere. The conflict of our time, we are learning, is the conflict between the rule of law and authoritarianism. And that's where I think where we get to hard questions about how strong our democracies are and what we need to do and what we can do to make them stronger. And I think part of why I wrote the book is I think that part of that is figuring out how to rein in and disempower forces like this industry that corrodes democracy and corrupts it and makes it seem like a sham all over the world.